Imagine, if you will, living your life every moment, every joy, every mistake over and over again for all eternity. Yes, I'm talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence. The idea that everything in your life, every decision you make, will repeat infinitely. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, doesn't it? But Nietzsche's proposition is far more than just a fantastical theory. It's a challenge to our perception of time, existence, and the choices we make every single day. Now, before you start thinking this sounds a bit too much to grasp or that it's just another abstract philosophical idea, let me ask you a simple question. If you knew that every moment of your life, from the mundane to the extraordinary, would repeat over and over again for eternity, would you live differently? Would you make different choices? Would you stop wasting time on things that don't matter and focus more on the things that truly give your life meaning? This concept forces us to confront a very real question. How can we find meaning and purpose in our everyday lives? Nietzsche wasn't just throwing out an abstract thought experiment. He was urging us to see each decision, each action, as a part of something much larger, a cycle that will go on forever. Whether you're happy with your life right now, or whether you have deep regrets, the question remains. How would you live if you knew everything, every failure, every joy, every heartache would repeat without end? In today's video, we'll explore how Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence can actually become a tool for self-improvement and personal growth. We'll discuss how this radical idea can challenge our complacency and force us to take responsibility for the choices we make. By examining the potential for both despair and inspiration that comes with living the same life infinitely, we'll dive into how we can transform the fear of repetition into a source of motivation and drive. So, before we start unraveling this mind-bending philosophy, I need you to take a second and ask yourself, how would you live your life differently if you had to repeat it over and over again for eternity? Would you embrace it, or would you resist it? But first, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into philosophy, and share this video with anyone you think would be interested in expanding their minds. And hey, if you love the content, please show your support with a super thanks. It really helps me continue making videos just like this one. Alright, now let's jump into Nietzsche's eternal recurrence and explore how we can turn this idea into a powerful tool for living a life of greater purpose and fulfillment. In the world of philosophy, few concepts are as provocative and deeply unsettling as Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. Imagine for a moment, every choice you've ever made, every mistake, every joy, every moment of pain will be repeated endlessly for all eternity. This isn't just a thought experiment. It's a radical challenge to how we understand life and the choices we make. If you had to live your life again and again, precisely the way you've lived it, would you still make the same decisions? Would you live differently? The concept of eternal recurrence, introduced by Nietzsche, is a fascinating, albeit disturbing, notion. It challenges the very essence of how we experience time, existence, and meaning. It forces us to consider the possibility that the life we're living right now, the one we think is finite, the one we think we control, is actually just one loop in an infinite cycle. It implies that our actions, every single one, are not fleeting, but instead will echo through eternity. This radical idea asks us to view life not as a series of events leading to an end, but as an eternal repetition of the present. The central idea behind Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is that life, the whole of existence, from the trivial to the monumental, is cyclical. We are destined to repeat the exact same life over and over again, without change for all eternity. Every action you take, every decision, every moment of happiness, sadness, success, or failure will recur infinitely. For Nietzsche, this concept is not just a metaphysical speculation, but a practical test of how we value our lives. If we knew that every choice, every action, would be repeated forever, would we still approach life the same way? At first glance, the idea of eternal recurrence might seem absurd or even unbearable. The thought of reliving every moment of our existence indefinitely seems impossible to reconcile with our everyday experience of time. But Nietzsche's proposition isn't just a metaphysical statement. It's an existential challenge. He doesn't ask us to accept eternal recurrence as a literal truth, but rather as a test of our engagement with life. The key question Nietzsche poses is, how would you live if you knew you would have to relive this life exactly as it is over and over again? Let's break this down with an example that many people can relate to: the mundane routines of everyday life. Imagine waking up every day to the same tasks: going to work, attending meetings, doing chores, eating, sleeping, and repeating it all over again. There's a chance that this monotony would feel unbearable if it were to repeat forever. The cycle of doing the same thing day in and day out, with no end in sight, might seem like a prison. However, Nietzsche's challenge is more profound than simply questioning the repetitiveness of life. It asks us to consider if we would still engage with our lives fully, knowing that there is no end. Take, for example, the lives of those who work in seemingly repetitive jobs. A nurse, a teacher, a customer service representative, all of these roles might appear monotonous. Yet they can hold deep meaning if one approaches them with intention. A nurse, for instance, might wake up each day to care for patients, administer treatments, and offer emotional support. If this routine were to be repeated infinitely, one could either grow weary of the cycle or find fulfillment in the act of caring, in making a difference in people's lives, no matter how small the moment seems. The idea of eternal recurrence asks us to reflect on the way we approach our daily lives. Do we live with passion, purpose, and meaning, or do we coast along, waiting for something better to come along? Moreover, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is a radical departure from traditional views of life and death. In many philosophies, life is understood as a journey with a beginning and an end, a process of growth that culminates in some form of closure. For Nietzsche, however, this closure does not exist. There is no end to life. The actions you take today, the words you speak, the love you give or withhold, the work you complete, will all be repeated. For Nietzsche, this gives every action immense significance, not because it's the last time you'll ever do it, but because it will happen over and over again for all eternity. This radical perspective compels us to confront the importance of every choice we make. Every decision, every moment of our existence is imbued with significance when we realize that it will be repeated infinitely. Nietzsche doesn't want us to live with fear or anxiety about the future, but rather with a sense of empowerment in the present. He challenges us to live fully, with an understanding that our lives are not just one-time events, but part of an eternal, unchanging cycle. But this concept isn't without its challenges. The idea of eternal recurrence can bring about feelings of despair. After all, if every mistake, every failure, every moment of heartache is bound to repeat forever, can we ever escape from our past? Can we change the course of our life? Or are we doomed to relive our worst moments over and over? This sense of despair is precisely what Nietzsche is trying to provoke. He wants us to confront the darkest aspects of our existence and ask, if we knew we were doomed to repeat our life exactly as it is, would we still find meaning in it? Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence also presents a profound challenge to how we view personal growth and transformation. If life is infinite, if every choice is destined to repeat forever, does that mean we are forever stuck in the same patterns? Or can we use this infinite repetition as an opportunity for growth and self-improvement? Here's where the true power of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence lies. Instead of seeing life as a series of isolated events, Nietzsche invites us to view it as a process of continual self-overcoming. Each moment in life becomes an opportunity for improvement, for learning, for becoming more of who we are meant to be. Even in the face of repetition, we can strive to make better choices, to improve our relationships, to deepen our understanding of the world, and to live with a greater sense of purpose. This concept of eternal recurrence asks us to rethink our approach to failure. Instead of seeing failure as a permanent state or an obstacle to our progress, we can see it as an opportunity to try again, to do better next time. The more we accept the possibility of eternal recurrence, the more we are compelled to act with intention and mindfulness, because we understand that each decision we make will echo through eternity. Ultimately, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence forces us to grapple with the meaning of life itself. If life is to be repeated forever, does it have any intrinsic value? Can we still find meaning in a world without an end? Nietzsche suggests that the true meaning of life is found not in an escape from the cycle, but in embracing it. Life's value comes not from its conclusion, but from its infinite potential for growth, transformation, and learning. Each moment, whether joyful or painful, becomes an opportunity to create meaning in our lives. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't just an abstract idea, it's a tool for living. By confronting the idea that every action, every moment, will be repeated forever, we are forced to take ownership of our lives in a way that few other philosophies demand. This doesn't mean that we have to be perfect or that we must avoid mistakes. But it does mean that we must live with a sense of responsibility, with an awareness that our lives matter, even in their smallest details. In the end, Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is not a punishment. It's a gift. It's a chance to live more authentically, to find meaning in the seemingly insignificant moments of life, and to create a life that we would be proud to live over and over again. The question is no longer whether we will live the same life forever, but whether we can learn to live it in a way that makes it worth repeating. In conclusion, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence challenges us to reevaluate the way we live. It forces us to confront the importance of every action and decision and asks us to live with intention and purpose. Whether we see it as a daunting prospect or an inspiring challenge, the idea of eternal recurrence calls us to make every moment count because, in the end, it just might. Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is more than just a metaphysical or philosophical idea. It is a radical challenge to how we perceive the meaning and value of our lives. It forces us to confront the reality that every action, every decision, every moment could be repeated, not once, but infinitely. Through this thought experiment, Nietzsche introduces a powerful tool for self-examination and a means to break free from the complacency that often defines human existence. At its core, the concept asks us one simple, but profound question. If you had to live your life over and over again, would you live differently? Or would you do exactly the same things you've already done? This question, seemingly simple on the surface, carries a deep weight, and Nietzsche uses it to push us toward a new understanding of how we approach life. He challenges us to think critically about our choices and the way we live, forcing us to reconsider the way we structure our lives, our decisions, and our relationships. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is not just a philosophical abstraction. It is a way to measure the quality of life itself. It asks us to reflect on whether the way we are currently living is truly worth repeating, or whether we're simply going through the motions, allowing life to slip by without any deeper meaning or purpose. To fully grasp the impact of Nietzsche's proposal, it's important to first understand the idea in its entirety. The eternal recurrence is the notion that everything, all experiences, all actions, all emotions repeats infinitely. This isn't a one-time do-over, but an endless cycle where each second of our lives will echo forever. Nietzsche's proposition doesn't allow us the luxury of ignoring our past mistakes or glossing over the choices we have made. It insists that we confront them head-on, and in doing so, it compels us to examine the present moment with a greater sense of urgency. At its heart, the idea of eternal recurrence disrupts our typical approach to time. Most people live as if time is an inexhaustible resource, one that will eventually run out, but that allows them the possibility to change or start fresh at some future moment. Nietzsche, however, strips away this illusion of infinite time, replacing it with a reality where the present is all that matters, and every moment will come back again. Imagine if you could never escape the consequences of your actions, or the repetitive nature of your existence. It would force you to think twice before making decisions, knowing that each choice would echo forever. Nietzsche's challenge isn't just about physical actions or decisions. It is about how we engage with the world around us on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level. When we consider this idea, the implications become clear. Every moment we live should be lived with intention, because each decision we make has lasting consequences, not only for ourselves, but for the world around us. Every relationship, every conversation, every job, and every act of kindness or cruelty will be repeated again, infinitely. This radical concept shakes us out of the trance of living life on autopilot and forces us to ask, is this the life I want to live, not just once, but forever? Consider the mundane aspects of life. Waking up every day to work, going through the motions of daily tasks, dealing with the stresses of modern life, all while chasing after fleeting goals that never seem to bring us lasting happiness. For many people, this routine becomes a form of passive living. They make decisions without fully considering the consequences or without understanding the long-term impact of their choices. But Nietzsche's idea asks us to break free from this passivity. If life were to repeat itself endlessly, then every action we take becomes significant. It becomes something worth considering in the deepest sense. Would you still make the same choices if you had to live them over and over again? Would you continue to ignore the things that are truly important in favor of fleeting distractions? Take, for example, a common scenario. Someone who feels stuck in a job they don't enjoy, simply going through the motions to collect a paycheck. Under the concept of eternal recurrence, this person might begin to ask themselves if they're truly content with the life they are living, knowing that they will be stuck in this same job with the same dissatisfaction forever. The idea of eternal recurrence forces us to reconsider our passivity in life, to stop accepting the things we don't want as inevitable, and to start making changes that will bring us closer to a life we would willingly repeat. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't just a critique of the mindless repetition of daily life. It's also a challenge to how we approach existential questions. So much of modern existence is driven by the desire to escape the mundane and find meaning elsewhere. People seek excitement, wealth, fame, or pleasure, hoping that one of these things will provide them with fulfillment. Yet, Nietzsche argues that this search for external meaning only leads to further dissatisfaction. By focusing on external rewards, we miss the true potential of our lives, which lies in embracing the present moment with full awareness and intention. The idea of eternal recurrence doesn't allow us the luxury of waiting for some perfect moment or event to come along and change our lives. Instead, it demands that we live fully in the here and now, knowing that this moment will repeat forever. For Nietzsche, the true challenge of eternal recurrence is not the fear of reliving painful experiences or failures, but rather the fear of living a life that has no deeper meaning. If we live our lives with the expectation that things will change eventually, or that we will eventually achieve something that will make us happy, we are living in denial of the reality of eternal recurrence. The key to truly embracing Nietzsche's concept is to find meaning in the very repetition of life itself. It asks us to live our lives as though we were proud to repeat them for all eternity. Consider the story of someone who spends their life avoiding responsibility, opting for a life of pleasure-seeking, and then finds themselves facing a sense of emptiness later in life. Under Nietzsche's framework, this person must reckon with the idea that their entire life, the moments they spent chasing pleasure, avoiding responsibility, and failing to confront the deeper questions of existence, will come back again, repeatedly. If we refuse to engage with life on a deeper level, we will be doomed to repeat a hollow existence forever. This is where Nietzsche's idea becomes a profound tool for self-examination. By recognizing the potential for eternal recurrence, we can begin to examine our own lives and ask whether we are living them with the awareness, purpose, and authenticity that would make them worth repeating. It forces us to stop living as if we have infinite time to change and improve. Instead, we must approach each decision with the awareness that it is a choice that will repeat for eternity. Ultimately, Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is not a call to despair or to resignation. Rather, it is a call to embrace life in its fullest form. It asks us to live our lives as if each moment is precious, as if every action carries weight, because it does. Life is not a series of disconnected events, but a continuous cycle of repetition. And every choice we make matters. This is the challenge that Nietzsche offers us: to live a life that is worth repeating, to live a life of meaning, purpose, and authenticity. In doing so, we can transform the mundane and the repetitive into something sacred, knowing that our actions, our decisions, and our very lives are eternal. In conclusion, Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence is a profound challenge that asks us to confront our own lives with a sense of urgency and purpose. It strips away the illusions of infinite time and reminds us that every moment counts. By engaging with life fully, living with intention, and embracing the present, we can find meaning in the repetition of existence. The idea of eternal recurrence asks us to ask ourselves, what kind of life am I living, and is it one I would want to repeat forever? If the answer isn't yes, then perhaps it's time to start making changes that will lead us toward a life worth repeating. Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence presents a unique challenge to our understanding of life, compelling us to view our daily existence with new eyes. The notion that every action, every choice, and every moment of our lives will be repeated infinitely forces us to reconsider how we live and what we find meaningful. It calls into question the significance of our everyday lives, which often seem monotonous, repetitive, and insignificant. Yet, if we truly accepted that life, as we know it, would repeat forever, could we learn to find meaning in even the most mundane aspects of existence? Could we transform the ordinary into something extraordinary? Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence offers a path to living with greater purpose and perhaps even joy. At first glance, the idea of living the same life over and over might seem like a curse. The mundane aspects of life, the daily routines, the repetitive tasks, the chores, and the seemingly endless obligations might feel unbearable under such a framework. For many, the daily grind feels like a series of obligations that must be checked off one by one. Yet, Nietzsche's concept offers an unexpected invitation to live with intention and find meaning in these repetitive acts. If every action is destined to repeat forever, it must hold some significance. The question then becomes, how can we live in a way that makes each repetition meaningful? Consider the work of a mechanic, for example. A mechanic's job might seem repetitive at first glance, fixing engines, replacing parts, and performing routine maintenance on vehicles day after day. If a mechanic were to accept the notion of eternal recurrence, they might realize that this work, while repetitive, is deeply meaningful. Each day, they have the opportunity to improve their craft, to learn something new, and to help others maintain their means of transportation. If they viewed their work as something that would be repeated forever, they might approach it with greater care, knowing that each act of repair is not just part of routine, but an act that is eternal in its significance. This approach can transform the seemingly mundane into an opportunity for growth and fulfillment. Similarly, farmers live lives that are marked by repetition. Every year, the seasons come and go, and the tasks of planting, cultivating, and harvesting are repeated. While the work is physically demanding and often repetitive, many farmers find meaning in the rhythms of nature, the satisfaction of growing food, and the connection to the land. In the context of eternal recurrence, a farmer might come to see their work as part of a larger cycle, a task that they will carry out infinitely. Instead of viewing the work as tedious or monotonous, they might begin to appreciate the opportunity to connect with the earth, to nurture life, and to participate in the cycles of growth. Each repetition becomes an opportunity to improve, to learn, and to find joy in the work itself. The same can be said for teachers, whose daily lives are filled with repetition. They teach the same lessons, interact with the same students, and face similar challenges year after year. For many, teaching might seem like an endless cycle of repeating the same material, answering the same questions, and dealing with similar issues. Yet, if a teacher embraces the idea of eternal recurrence, they might see their work as more than just repetition. Each lesson they teach is an opportunity to inspire, to make a difference in a student's life, and to continually refine their teaching methods. The repetition of their work becomes an opportunity for self-improvement, for deepening their understanding of the material, and for making a lasting impact on their students. What Nietzsche is asking us to consider in the context of eternal recurrence is how we engage with the things we find repetitive or boring. Instead of seeing these actions as meaningless tasks to be endured, Nietzsche invites us to see them as opportunities for improvement and growth. Each moment, no matter how mundane, can be a chance to refine ourselves, to make better choices, and to find deeper meaning in the everyday. When we realize that our lives might repeat indefinitely, we become more aware of the significance of our actions, even the smallest ones. Each action, no matter how small, becomes an opportunity to act with purpose, to live with intention, and to create meaning in the repetition. In fact, Nietzsche's idea can be seen as a call to embrace the repetition itself. It's not about avoiding or escaping the mundane, but rather about fully engaging with it. We often try to escape the repetition of life by seeking out new experiences, new distractions, or new achievements. We might think that fulfillment lies in novelty, in change, or in the pursuit of something outside of ourselves. However, Nietzsche challenges this notion by suggesting that the true value of life comes not from escaping repetition, but from embracing it. If we can find meaning in the things that repeat, then we can find meaning in life itself. Think about the concept of meditation, which requires repeating the same process over and over again, sitting quietly, breathing, and focusing the mind. The repetition of this practice is often seen as the path to inner peace and enlightenment. Over time, meditators begin to realize that the repetition itself is where the value lies. It's not about achieving something new, but about fully immersing oneself in the present moment, in the rhythm of the breath, and in the flow of thoughts. The repetition becomes a tool for self-mastery, for cultivating patience, and for developing mindfulness. In much the same way, Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence invites us to view our lives as a form of meditation. Life is not about finding the next big thing or escaping the cycles of daily existence. Instead, it's about embracing those cycles and finding meaning in the process itself. Each moment, each repetition is an opportunity to improve, to learn, and to grow. In this sense, eternal recurrence is not a punishment, but a gift that allows us to live with purpose, to find meaning in the everyday, and to create a life worth repeating. This shift in perspective from seeing repetition as something to be avoided to seeing it as something to be embraced is not easy. It requires us to let go of the belief that our lives are inherently limited or finite. It asks us to see every moment as valuable, to view each action as an opportunity for improvement, and to live with the awareness that everything we do matters, not just once but forever. This can be a liberating realization. When we stop waiting for life to change or for something new to happen, we begin to appreciate what we already have. We begin to see the beauty in the mundane, the significance in the small moments, and the value in the repetitive tasks that we often take for granted. Ultimately, the lesson from eternal recurrence is that life is not something to be endured or escaped from, but something to be fully embraced. the more we embrace the repetition of life, the more we can find meaning in it. Whether we're fixing a car, planting crops, or teaching students, every task is an opportunity for growth and self-improvement. By living with the awareness that our lives may repeat forever, we can begin to appreciate the value of each moment. And in doing so, we can transform even the most mundane aspects of life into something meaningful. Nietzsche's challenge is not just about the avoidance of suffering or the search for happiness. It's about embracing the fullness of life, both the highs and the lows, the joys and the sorrows, the repetition and the novelty. When we live with the understanding that every moment will be repeated for eternity, we begin to live more authentically, more intentionally, and more fully. In this way, Eternal Recurrence becomes a guide to living a life that is worth repeating, a life that is filled with meaning, purpose, and a deep connection to the present moment. The concept of eternal recurrence, proposed by Friedrich Nietzsche, introduces an unsettling thought experiment that has the power to disrupt our fundamental understanding of existence. At the heart of this idea is the radical suggestion that everything in our lives, every decision, every moment of joy, and every failure will repeat, not once, but infinitely. While this concept challenges us to find meaning in the repetition of life, it also brings forward a difficult and existential question. How would we cope with the idea of living the same mistakes, pain, and failures over and over again for all eternity? Nietzsche forces us to reckon with the weight of our choices and the fear of never being able to escape from our past. The prospect of facing eternal recurrence does not just make us reflect on the joy we might experience, but also brings us face to face with our deepest fears, regrets, and vulnerabilities. Imagine that every failure, every loss, every painful moment of your life will return exactly as it was over and over again. Can we truly live with the idea of having to relive the worst moments of our lives? Nietzsche's thought experiment introduces a terrifying concept, the idea that if our lives repeat infinitely, the suffering we have endured may also return without end. Let's consider a person who has made a significant mistake in their life, perhaps ruining an important relationship. The consequences of this mistake may haunt them, filling them with guilt and regret. They might spend years wishing they could go back in time and undo their actions, but with eternal recurrence, they're forced to confront the possibility that this mistake and the accompanying pain will be a constant presence in their existence. If this person knew that their failure would repeat forever, could they find the strength to continue? Could they live with the burden of their past, knowing that it would never truly go away? The emotional weight of such a thought can feel overwhelming. Nietzsche's concept challenges the very core of how we perceive redemption and growth, suggesting that there may be no ultimate escape from the consequences of our actions. In a more relatable context, think about someone who has experienced a profound loss, the death of a loved one, for instance. The grief and sorrow that accompany such an event are deeply personal, and it can take years to come to terms with the loss. But under the idea of eternal recurrence, the person would have to face the reality that the grief and loss would never be allowed to fade. They would have to relive the pain of that loss, the emptiness and the despair over and over again. The thought of living with such profound sadness for eternity is enough to make anyone question the purpose of life itself. It presents an existential challenge. How do we reconcile the inevitability of suffering with the potential for growth and meaning in life? This is where the existential despair comes in. Eternal recurrence, in Nietzsche's vision, brings us face to face with the possibility of living not just the joyful moments of life, but also the moments of regret, sorrow, and failure eternally. There is no escape, no final resolution, only the repetitive cycle of our past. This thought experiment can easily lead us into a state of despair as we realize that our lives are not as transient as we thought. The mistakes, the regrets, and the failures we try to escape from would, instead, become our constant companions. The fear and doubt that arise from this idea are understandable. The overwhelming sense of helplessness in the face of eternal recurrence might lead many to question the very foundation of their existence. If everything, including our mistakes, is doomed to repeat itself without change, can we ever move forward? Is there a point in trying to change or grow if all of our actions will simply return to us in the future, unchanged? Nietzsche's radical idea forces us to question the nature of personal responsibility and redemption. If our lives are destined to repeat themselves, then do we have any true agency? Or are we merely trapped in a cycle of fate? However, Nietzsche doesn't present this idea merely to provoke despair or hopelessness. In fact, he uses eternal recurrence as a tool to encourage personal growth and transformation. For Nietzsche, the existential challenge posed by this thought experiment is not about succumbing to despair, but about finding the courage to live with responsibility, purpose, and intention. If we were to accept that our lives with all their failures and shortcomings will repeat eternally, then we must learn to live in a way that embraces those moments. Nietzsche asks us, can you live a life that is worth repeating forever? In this light, Nietzsche suggests that the despair we feel when confronted with eternal recurrence can actually become a powerful catalyst for change. The idea that we would have to relive our mistakes eternally forces us to face our flaws head-on and take responsibility for our actions. Instead of running away from our mistakes, we must learn to accept them, to learn from them, and to move forward. Each failure, no matter how painful, can be seen as an opportunity for growth and self-improvement. If our lives are destined to repeat, then we must ensure that each repetition is better than the last. Take the example of someone who has caused harm to a loved one through their actions. Perhaps they made a mistake that caused irreparable damage to a relationship. Under the concept of eternal recurrence, this person would have to confront the reality that they will relive the pain of that mistake forever. But Nietzsche's challenge is not to wallow in guilt and despair. Instead, he proposes that the person use this knowledge to transform themselves. Knowing that their actions will have infinite consequences, they will be forced to reconsider their behavior and seek ways to improve, to make reparations, and to grow. The fear and despair that arise from the thought of eternal recurrence become, in Nietzsche's framework, a powerful motivator for self-overcoming and personal responsibility. Moreover, the concept of eternal recurrence is not just about accepting the consequences of our actions. It is about living each moment with the awareness that it has eternal significance. Nietzsche encourages us to live as though every action is our last, not in the sense of indulging in reckless behavior or abandoning all responsibility, but in the sense of making each action count. If we were to live every moment as if it would be repeated forever, we would find ourselves more present, more engaged, and more conscious of the impact of our choices. Nietzsche suggests that, rather than viewing our mistakes as permanent sources of despair, we can use them as stepping stones toward a better version of ourselves. The idea of eternal recurrence forces us to confront our limitations and shortcomings, but it also presents an opportunity to transcend them. Every moment is an opportunity to improve, to act with greater purpose, and to make choices that will echo through eternity in a positive way. This is the essence of Nietzsche's philosophy, the rejection of nihilism and despair, and the embrace of responsibility and transformation. This is not to say that the burden of eternal recurrence is easy to bear. It requires us to live with a profound sense of responsibility, knowing that every action matters, that every decision carries weight. But Nietzsche's philosophy offers hope within this burden. The challenge of eternal recurrence is not meant to paralyze us with fear, but to empower us to live more fully, to embrace the highs and lows of life with a sense of purpose and courage. The key lesson that emerges from Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is that we have the power to transform our lives. regardless of past mistakes or failures. Every moment is an opportunity to change, to grow, and to live with greater awareness and intention. Nietzsche's radical proposition asks us to confront our deepest fears and doubts, but also offers us a chance to overcome them. By accepting the idea that our lives will repeat, we can begin to live in a way that makes each moment meaningful, not in spite of, but because of the knowledge that every choice we make will have eternal consequences. In the end, the burden of eternal recurrence is not a curse, but a challenge to live authentically, to take responsibility for our actions, and to strive for personal growth. Nietzsche's philosophy asks us to embrace the weight of our decisions, knowing that they are not just fleeting moments, but eternal echoes that shape our lives forever. Through this acceptance, we can transcend despair and create lives that are worth living, lives that we would be proud to repeat for all eternity. Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence challenges us to rethink not just the nature of time and existence, but also how we approach the choices and actions that make up our daily lives. The idea that every moment, every decision, and every experience will be repeated infinitely forces us to confront the value of our existence and the significance of every action. On the surface, this notion might seem like a burden, a haunting reminder that the mistakes and struggles of our lives are eternal. However, Nietzsche presents a radical opportunity to transform the repetition of life into a chance for self-improvement, growth, and fulfillment. In this context, eternal recurrence can become a source of motivation for personal development, a reminder that each moment is precious and that every experience, even the failures, holds the potential for meaning. At first glance, the idea of reliving the same experiences forever might seem overwhelmingly negative, as it implies being trapped in an endless loop of our mistakes, regrets, and failures. The very thought of repeating our lives, with all their imperfections, could induce a sense of despair. However, Nietzsche's brilliance lies in his ability to turn this concept on its head. He does not present eternal recurrence as a form of punishment, but rather as an opportunity to approach life with purpose, mindfulness, and a deep sense of responsibility. If we're destined to live the same life over and over, then each moment, each choice, each act, each relationship becomes an opportunity to improve, to refine, and to perfect ourselves. The challenge Nietzsche poses is both simple and profound. Can we live in such a way that we would embrace the repetition of our lives? Can we live with such intention and authenticity that, when faced with the prospect of reliving our lives eternally, we would not regret our choices? Nietzsche's radical proposition encourages us to see life not as a series of fleeting moments, but as an eternal opportunity for growth, self-overcoming, and transformation. Every choice we make, every action we take, carries with it the potential for self-improvement, and this understanding can serve as a powerful motivator for living with purpose. This idea can be illustrated by looking at the experiences of people who face repeated challenges or setbacks. Take, for instance, a scientist working on a particularly difficult experiment. In the pursuit of knowledge, failure is inevitable. Experiments do not always work out as planned, and hypotheses can be disproven. However, instead of seeing these failures as setbacks, many scientists choose to view them as learning opportunities. One well-known example is Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison's ability to turn failure into a stepping stone for success is a perfect demonstration of how one can transform repetition, the repeated trials and errors, into a chance for improvement. Similarly, in the context of eternal recurrence, Nietzsche suggests that each mistake or failure could be viewed as an opportunity to do better. If our lives are to repeat forever, then each failure is not a permanent stain on our existence, but a chance to correct, improve, and grow. The key is not to avoid failure, but to learn from it, to view each mistake as part of a larger process of self-improvement. By accepting the cyclical nature of existence, we can begin to appreciate the value of each moment, even the difficult ones, as opportunities for learning and growth. The idea of transforming failure into growth is not limited to the scientific community. Many individuals in various fields have adopted a similar mindset, using setbacks as motivation to continue their pursuit of excellence. For example, professional athletes often speak about how failure in one game or season motivates them to train harder and perform better in the future. Michael Jordan, widely considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time, famously said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Jordan's repeated failures did not deter him. Instead, they became the fuel for his success. He understood that each failure was simply a part of the process of becoming better, a process that would repeat indefinitely. By adopting this mindset, we can begin to see each moment, each action, and each decision as an opportunity to improve. If our lives are destined to repeat, then the question becomes, how do we want to live? Will we continue making the same mistakes, living with the same regrets, or will we choose to grow, to learn, and to improve with each repetition? Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence offers us the chance to reflect on this question. Instead of seeing life as a series of random events that occur only once, we are invited to approach each moment with the awareness that it may be repeated forever. This awareness can inspire us to live more intentionally, more consciously, and more purposefully. Nietzsche's call to live as though each moment matters, as though it could be repeated infinitely, is a powerful reminder of the importance of mindfulness and intentionality in our lives. It challenges us to live not for some distant future or in the hope of a better tomorrow, but to live fully in the present, knowing that every action, no matter how small, will have lasting consequences. If we live our lives with the awareness that each moment matters, we are more likely to make choices that align with our values and our goals. We are more likely to live authentically, to take responsibility for our actions, and to strive for personal growth in every area of our lives. But that each of these experiences is a part of our development. By accepting this cyclical process, we can stop seeing failure as a dead end and instead view it as an essential part of the journey towards self-mastery. This mindset also calls into question our approach to relationships and personal connections. How many times do we let minor disagreements or misunderstandings affect our relationships, only to regret those moments later? If we understood that each action, each word, each interaction with others could be repeated infinitely, would we approach our relationships with more care, more understanding, and more empathy? Will we take the time to listen more deeply, to offer kindness more freely, and to invest in the people around us in a way that reflects their infinite significance in our lives? For Nietzsche, and each experience with the understanding that it matters, not just for now, but for eternity. The power of eternal recurrence lies in its ability to encourage us to live with purpose, to take ownership of our lives, and to strive for personal growth, not in spite of, but because of the cyclical nature of existence. Nietzsche's call to action is clear. Live as though each moment is worth repeating, as though every action will echo throughout eternity. By doing so, we can transform our lives into a journey of self-overcoming, a continuous process of becoming the best version of ourselves. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every success becomes a stepping stone. And every moment, no matter how small, becomes an opportunity for growth. The key is to embrace the cyclical nature of life, to accept that every moment is both fleeting and eternal, and to live with the awareness that the choices we make today will shape our lives forever. In the end, Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence asks us to reconsider how we live. It challenges us to see our lives not as a series of disconnected events, but as a continuous, repeating cycle of opportunity for self-improvement, personal growth and fulfillment. By embracing this idea, we can begin to live with greater purpose, greater awareness, and greater intention, creating lives that are not just worth living once, but worth living over and over again. Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence isn't just an intellectual challenge. It's a call to live with a deeper sense of responsibility and awareness. This idea forces us to confront the significance of every decision, every action, and every moment. The idea that we might have to live the same life repeatedly, every joy, every pain, every triumph, and every failure is both daunting and liberating. On one hand, it can provoke feelings of despair, as we realize that the mistakes and regrets of our lives will never be erased. But on the other hand, it provides an incredible opportunity to live more intentionally, to take responsibility for our choices, and to treat every moment as precious. Nietzsche's challenge isn't just to understand life, but to live it in such a way that, if we had to repeat it infinitely, we would still find meaning, growth, and purpose in every action. At its core, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence is not merely about the repetition of time or events. It is about how we choose to live within that repetition. If we are to live the same life forever, how can we make each moment meaningful? Nietzsche urges us to consider life not as a series of fleeting events, but as a continuous cycle, where every decision matters because it will return infinitely. The challenge is to live in such a way that, knowing our choices will echo through eternity, we choose wisely, act with purpose, and live authentically. Each choice becomes a reflection of who we truly are and who we wish to become. Take the example of a person struggling with the idea of repeating their failures forever, and to become better versions of ourselves. If we take responsibility for our choices and actions, we might find that the very failures we dread become opportunities for self-improvement and transformation. In this sense, eternal recurrence is not a punishment, but a powerful invitation to live with greater awareness, to face our flaws, and to use every moment, no matter how difficult, as an opportunity for growth. For many, the idea of living forever with their mistakes might seem like a curse, but Nietzsche's philosophy asks us to flip that narrative. Instead of fearing the repetition of our failures, we can choose to see them as lessons that will never be forgotten, lessons that allow us to refine ourselves and our actions over time. Just as a musician practices the same scales repeatedly to improve their technique, so too can we practice self-reflection and self-improvement. Life, then, becomes an ongoing process of refining our character, understanding our values, and becoming more aligned with the person we want to be. Nietzsche's challenge isn't to avoid failure, but to approach it with a mindset that each experience, no matter how painful, contributes to our growth and our ability to live with greater authenticity. This approach can be applied to every area of life, whether it's our personal relationships, our work, or our approach to challenges. Eternal recurrence asks us to live with the awareness that each moment is significant. In relationships, for example, we often make mistakes or take the people in our lives for granted. Under the lens of eternal recurrence, we are asked to reflect on how we treat others, knowing that these interactions will repeat forever. If we had to relive every conversation, every argument, every moment of love or anger, how would we act? Will we take the time to listen more carefully, to show more compassion, to offer more understanding? Nietzsche's idea asks us to live with an awareness of the long-term impact of our actions, especially in our relationships, because each moment, each interaction will come back again. Consider the impact of how we live our professional lives. How many times do we settle for mediocrity, thinking that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things? How many times do we procrastinate, cut corners, or put off difficult decisions, assuming that there will always be another chance? Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence forces us to consider the implications of this approach. If our work, our efforts, our contributions to society are destined to be repeated forever, How can we make sure that they reflect the highest version of ourselves? Will we continue to take shortcuts, or would we strive to do our best every time, knowing that each effort counts, not just for today, but for eternity? By internalizing the idea of eternal recurrence, we begin to see life not as a series of isolated events, but as a continuous cycle, one where every action matters. If we view every decision as something that will be repeated eternally, we become more mindful of our choices. We begin to recognize that life is not something to be rushed through or taken for granted. Each moment, no matter how small, becomes an opportunity to refine ourselves, to live with greater integrity, and to act in accordance with our deepest values. Nietzsche's philosophy calls us to live in the present with a sense of urgency, not because we fear the future, but because we understand the profound significance of each moment. Furthermore, Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence challenges us to live in a way that is not dependent on external validation or fleeting rewards. In a world where many people live for the next promotion, the next paycheck, the next milestone, Nietzsche asks us to find meaning in the process itself. If our lives are to be repeated endlessly, then the value of life cannot come from external achievements alone. Instead, the value must lie in the way we live each moment, in the way we engage with life, and in the way we choose to make our lives meaningful. The pursuit of status, wealth, or recognition is ultimately transient, but the way we live, the choices we make, the relationships we build, the personal growth we achieve is eternal. Living with the awareness of eternal recurrence also forces us to confront the fear of death and the limitations of time. Often, we live with the assumption that time is finite and that we have a limited window to achieve our goals. This perspective can lead to anxiety, as we rush to accomplish as much as we can before time runs out. However, Nietzsche's philosophy offers a different view. If we accept the idea that life is an eternal cycle, we may be less inclined to fear death because we understand that our actions and decisions will continue to reverberate throughout eternity. This can give us the freedom to live more fully in the present, without being paralyzed by the fear of time running out. In the face of this radical proposition, we are also called to live with greater resilience. Life, with all its challenges and difficulties, is not always easy. We face obstacles, setbacks, and losses that can make us question the value of continuing. But Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence encourages us to face these challenges head-on, knowing that every struggle, every hardship, is an opportunity for growth. If we're to live the same life over and over again, then we must find the strength to persevere, to learn from our difficulties, and to continue moving forward. The cyclical nature of existence, far from being a burden, becomes a source of strength, reminding us that every challenge is a chance to improve, to refine our character, and to become the best version of ourselves. Ultimately, Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence is a call to live more consciously, more responsibly, and more authentically. It challenges us to stop living in autopilot mode, to stop waiting for the future to provide meaning, and to start living with a sense of purpose in the present. If every moment is to be repeated forever, then we must live as though each moment matters. We must strive to make each action, each choice, each interaction meaningful, because they will echo throughout eternity. Nietzsche's philosophy asks us to live in a way that we would be proud to repeat, not because we have to, but because we have chosen to make our lives worth living over and over again. This perspective can be liberating because it reminds us that the power to shape our lives lies within us. Every choice, no matter how small, has the potential to transform our lives and our world. By embracing the idea of eternal recurrence, we take responsibility for our actions, our growth, and our future. We are not passive recipients of life's events, but active participants in the creation of our own meaning. The challenge is to live with the awareness that each moment, each choice, and each experience is an opportunity for self-overcoming, for growth, and for becoming the person we are meant to be. If we live in this way, we can truly find meaning in every moment, and in doing so, create a life that is worth repeating for all eternity. As we wrap up today's exploration of Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, I hope you've started to see this radical idea in a new light. Yes, the thought of having to live our lives over and over again, facing our mistakes and our regrets for eternity, might initially seem terrifying. But what if I told you that the key to finding meaning in this cycle is not in escaping it, but in embracing it? Nietzsche's challenge is not about running away from our flaws or wishing for a different reality. Instead, it's about taking full responsibility for the life we have right now, making each moment count, and living with the understanding that everything we do has lasting significance. Living with the awareness that our actions, our choices, and our very lives may repeat eternally forces us to confront what really matters. It challenges us to live with intention, to improve ourselves constantly, and to make choices that reflect the best version of who we want to be. So, the next time you're faced with a difficult decision or even a seemingly insignificant moment, ask yourself, if I had to relive this moment forever, would I be proud of my choices? If not, maybe it's time to make a change. Because in Nietzsche's world of eternal recurrence, every action counts and every moment is an opportunity to create a life worth living over and over again. Now, before you go, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with anyone who could benefit from a deeper understanding of Nietzsche's philosophy. And as always, if you want to show your support, a super thanks goes a long way in helping me create more content like this. Thank you so much for being part of this journey with me. And remember, every moment, every decision, every choice matters. So, live like you're going to repeat it for eternity. See you in the next video. Keep thinking, keep growing, and keep living with purpose.